Hey everyone, if you're new here, my name is Dani Christine. I am a multi-site childcare business owner, consultant, and a digital content creator on childcaresites.com, where you can find resources for childcare professionals such as yourself, whether you are a home daycare provider, center childcare owner, or operating multiple childcare businesses like myself. There are multiple things that you can take advantage of on childcaresites.com, including free worksheets, videos like this one, booking private consultations with me, and you can also get access to courses to help you start or grow your childcare business. I have a course that I released in January earlier this year that is currently 25% off until the end of this month, so be sure to head on over there to take advantage of that offer. Now, I know that in my last videos, I promised that I would come to you guys with a tour of my third childcare center that we just opened a couple months ago, but I have a good reason why this one is coming out before that one. And the reason is that what I'm explaining in this video is really time sensitive, and I noticed that there was a lot of confusion about it. So bear with me. The tour and videos about my third center are still coming. I will probably be releasing that in a couple of days, but this video in particular, I really wanted to do something special and focus on my New York City childcare providers, specifically New York City, or if you're thinking about starting a program in New York City. To be extremely specific, what I mean by New York City is if you are located in one of the 5 boroughs, New York City, which is Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, or Staten Island. Those 5 boroughs encompass New York City. Where my programs are located in Long Island is not a part of New York City. Westchester County is not part of New York City. New Jersey is not part of New York City. And I know that, please forgive me if you're like, why is she explaining this? But honestly, it's because a lot of people might not recognize that certain areas that are borderline really are not included. I know for some of my employees, I have to correct them whenever they're filling out their tax withholding paperwork. Specifically the IT 2104, if they have to select whether they're a resident of New York City or New York State. Some of them might live in Long Island and check off that they live in New York City. You don't live in New York City, right? So New York City, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, the Bronx, Staten Island. Okay? If you have a program there, or if you are thinking about starting a program there, whether it is a home daycare or a center in a commercial property, this opportunity that I'm discussing is applicable to you. Every couple of years, there is something called a request for proposal, or what I'll be referring to as an RFP, that gets released by the New York City Department of Education, or the DOE. The DOE will release this RFP for the public to submit proposals for in order to have a chance to contract with the DOE to receive an award to provide universal pre-K for children ages 3 and or 4 years old, or those that will be turning 3 or 4 years old by December of that school year, or the upcoming school year. So, universal pre-K is free public education for families that have children that are 3 or 4 and residents of the area that it is being offered in. Outside of New York City, in the rest of the state, universal pre-K is very limited. There are not a lot of universal pre-K offering school districts. However, inside of New York City, it is really pretty much everywhere. It is very much public knowledge that if you have a 3 or 4 year old or a child that's turning that age in the upcoming school year, you know that you could get childcare for free. A lot of school district buildings, if not maybe all elementary school district buildings within the 5 boroughs, have universal pre-K classes, and it is more commonly known as pre-K for all or 3K for all. That's the title. However, it's universal pre-K or UPK. So every couple of years, an RFP is released for providers that are interested in offering UPK services inside of their programs. According to the RFP and the DOE or whoever is offering this contract, those programs are called community-based organizations. If you run a childcare business, you are a community-based organization. It doesn't mean you're a nonprofit. It doesn't mean that you offer any other community services. If you have a childcare business, you're considered a CBO, community-based organization. And you don't have to do anything special or apply to become a CBO, you just are. And the reason that they refer to childcare businesses as CBOs is because it's not just CBOs that are eligible to submit proposals for this. I believe in some areas they encourage libraries to submit proposals to run a UPK program out of it. It could be that you have a city-owned or leased facility and you provide other services. There are certain types of organizations that are not only childcare programs that are eligible to submit proposals. So in order to just all encompass in their reference to the applicant, they call them CBOs. So if you and your CBO are interested in submitting a proposal for UPK to get a contract with the DOE in New York City, this is the time to really get on it and figure out whether it's for you or if you want to apply. Because by the end of this month, November 30th, the proposals are due. What really inspired me to get on here and make this video is that I could see that there's a lot of confusion about what is required, what it even is, or how to go about applying for it. This is considered a grant, but it is not like any other grant that we have been seeing pop up throughout the past 2 years due to the pandemic. This is something that has been going on for years and years and usually cycles around like once every other year. The New York City DOE releases the RFP to get CBOs to contract with them every couple of years. I think a while back it used to be every single year. And then I want to say back in 2014 or 2015, they started limiting it to only specific CBOs and specific zip codes within the New York City 5 boroughs are eligible to apply. And the reason for that change, to my knowledge, is because it was important, or the goal is really to create seats, pre-K seats for all the children in New York City. And if certain zip codes and certain school districts already have enough pre-K seats based on the demographics of the area, the city collects information on the residents of each zip code or each school district. They know how many children of pre-K age live in those areas, and they know exactly how many seats are going to be required to make sure one is available for universally all of those children, right? So there are certain zip codes or school districts in New York City where you might not be able to submit your proposal for because those areas are already oversaturated or have just enough or more than enough programs that have seats available for children of the appropriate age. And there are other districts where there is a scarcity of programs that have available seats for children of the appropriate age. So this RFP that is currently out is only for, I believe, 20 school districts. It could be a little more or less. And then more specifically, only zip codes, very specific zip codes within those school districts. Now, whether you are a home daycare provider, which is in New York City considered family or group family, or if you have centers, you are still eligible to submit your proposal for this. And get this, even if you are not any one of those providers, if you have nothing and you are interested in contracting, you can be in the startup phase in order to submit your proposal for this. The contract term is from July of 2022 to June of 2026. So it is a 4-year contract. If you are awarded, you would be contracting with the city for 4 years. And you would need to make sure that your childcare program, if you are in startup phase, is one, in the appropriate zip code and school district that meet the eligibility requirements, and 2, that you receive your license to operate by June of 2022. That does not leave much time. If you're watching this video around the time that I'm publishing it, it is November 2021, specifically the middle of November 2021. So June of 2022 is only less than 8 months away. So within 8 months, if you are not currently operating in one of those eligible zip codes and school districts, you would have to find a location, make sure that it meets the building requirements in order to even be a daycare facility. That is, if you're doing a commercial property, apply for your license, get through all the required inspections, and then receive your license within these 8 months. And if you're not new here, you know that for me, I like going through the licensing process quickly, and I've been lucky. The past 2 centers that I opened, I was able to get open in about 1 month. But as a reminder, those were in properties that were previously licensed as childcare businesses before. No, I did not buy the business. No, I did not take over anybody's license, but just the fact that it was previously operating as a licensed childcare business helped with speeding through the licensing process, because it was very evident that those facilities were already up to code with like the building department requirements. If you're going into a commercial space that has never been a childcare business before, you have to first deal with the building department and getting the correct certificate of occupancy, and then moving on to going through the licensing process with the city. If it's a commercial facility. If it's a home, you will surely be able to get through the licensing process much more quickly than you could in a center-based location. But still, nevertheless, 8 months is not a lot of time. Usually, licensing processes, depending on your situation, on average take anywhere between 6 to 12 months. It could be longer, but of course, in some cases, which I have proven, it could be a lot less. But it really just depends. So, keeping in mind that you have to get through the licensing process by June of 2022, something else to consider is that the proposal, in order to apply to participate in this universal pre-K contract, is due on November 30th, which from today, as I'm publishing this, is only 15 days away. Now, if you are just now considering contracting with the city in order to provide universal pre-K, you might be thinking that 15 days is not enough time. Maybe I'll catch it in the next year or whenever it's gonna release next. And here's just a little piece of encouragement. It is not too late. 15 days, 2 weeks, you can get it done if you really set your mind to it. If it's something that you know is for you or that you have been wanting to do for a while, I promise you could figure out how to get it done. It's just a matter of focusing pretty much solely on that project for the next 2 weeks in order to make sure you submit all of your requirements. Now, if you're starting from scratch and don't have a facility or a house to be running this program out of in one of the eligible zip codes just yet, then maybe it's a little too late. But now you have this information to think about as the years go by, so that next time an opportunity does come about, you're prepared. So I would encourage you, even if you're not interested or able to submit your proposal to participate in this contract term, look at at the requirements, look at the RFP that's out, look at all of the appendix that comes along with it to see what questions are being asked, what requirements are mandated, and what you would need to do if something similar came out in the future. As a warning and a reminder, like I mentioned, only specific zip codes are eligible to apply. So if it does release again around this time next year, there is no guarantee that the zip codes that are there right now are also going to be in the next RFP that releases next year or the year after. And there's honestly no guarantee that an RFP is going to release every single year. If I'm not mistaken, a couple years back, it was skipping like every other year. And if you're in New York City and know anything about this, please correct me if I'm wrong. But there's no guarantee that an RFP will become available every year. And there's no guarantee that if an RFP does release, that your zip code that you would like to apply for will be included. So this is why I'm really trying to encourage that if this is something that you're interested in, or if you do see that you're in an eligible zip code and you have a program currently running, just look into it a little more and see if this is something you would actually consider participating in. Just to give a little more context about what the RFP actually includes, what information is in there, or why you might be interested. While this might be free for families, the way that you would get paid as a childcare provider that has a contract with New York City is that the DOE will specifically pay the monies out to you for the expenses of the program. So it is public education for the children and families. And for you, it is money coming from the public, from the city, paid directly to you to cover the cost. And that would be cost for your teacher salaries. It would be cost for your administrative expenses, for furniture, supplies, equipment, and cost to you as the owner. If you have a position, you would have to make sure that you have a position that you can document what it is that you work on that is related to the DOE program that they're paying you for. You could get money in that way. And to be even more specific, it's really just during school hours. So it's 6 hours and 20 minutes of the day, which usually is going to be around 8 a.m. to around 2 p.m. or something like that. I don't think that they're very specific on the hours, like the specific times that you open and close your UPK program, but it does have to specifically be running 6 hours and 20 minutes a day for 180 days. So it is specifically during the school year only, from September through June, for school day hours of only 6 hours and 20 minutes per day for at least 180 days throughout that school year term. So that's important to know. And the RFP does detail that the average cost of care for 3-year-olds is around $17,000 per year, and the average cost of care for the pre-K program for 4-year-olds is around $14,000 a year. Around there, ballpark. But you can click in and see the RFP materials to see the specific dollar amounts that are noted. However, even though that is what is noted in the RFP, that does not mean that is specifically what your program will be paid. You do have to create a budget and submit it as a part of your proposal, and the budget needs to include all of the expenses that are going to be allocated to the Universal Pre-K program, specifically the children enrolled through that program and the hours of care that are specifically for the Universal Pre-K program. And the reason that that is important to note is because you might offer other services. You might offer before and after school care for children that are included in the DOE's UPK program. You might have Billy who found your program because mom wanted to have Billy in the free pre-K program. However, mom has to work until 6 p.m. every day and she needs a place for Billy to go. she's not going to leave work to take a break to go pick him up and bring him somewhere else. She might, but more than likely, if you offer after school programming for the same age group, you could make sure that Billy stays with you, but the DOE's money is only going to be paid out for 2 o'clock if that's when your school day ends, from 8 to 2. And if Billy is there until 6:30, then mom has to cover the rest of that cost. Or if she has a subsidy from the city or a work voucher or something else to cover her childcare tuition, that money from that part of the day could be applied to pay off her tuition bill. So there are multiple opportunities for different streams of income throughout your program. It's not that you are only locked into receiving the money from the DOE, but it is certainly helpful, and it's important that you make sure you categorize your expenses specifically for the DOE contracted universal pre-K program. You put it in your budget as such. So if the staff that you have work 8 or 9 hours a day, you can only pay them for the DOE portion of the day only 6 hours and 20 minutes of that time, unless the stuff that they are working on outside of those hours are only for the universal pre-K. So it gets very, very detailed and very specific, which is why it's important for you to read into the RFP, hire some help if you need help. There are grant writers. I specifically have a grant writer that I'm working with. I did ask her to do a webinar with me a couple weeks ago, but I'm just waiting for her response on that. But I know that she's very busy because she works with a lot of programs to help them through the proposal process. So if she becomes available and is willing to hop on a webinar with me, you'll be the first to know. But there are many grant writers out there that can assist you through the proposal process. However, it is important that before you reach out to a grant writer, understand that they cost money, a pretty penny. And secondly, you need to know the information before you ask them to help you apply. It's not hard. It's just tedious and a lot of documents and pages. So you need to make time to set aside a couple hours out of one day to go through all of the RFP materials, read through it to see if it would even be feasible for your program, figure out if you're even eligible or if the program that you're thinking about opening would even be eligible, not just because of the zip code and school district, but because of the other requirements. One of the requirements is that you have to have a certified teacher leading each pre-K classroom or 3K classroom that you have. They must be certified. They cannot be on a study plan, if I'm not mistaken. If it's a universal pre-K contracted classroom, the teacher must be certified. And I also know that to have a director of a center in New York City, that director has to be certified. So you might be talking about hiring multiple certified staff. And if that is something that you feel like you cannot do, then this is probably not for you. Now, understand that the cost of those teachers can be offset by the grant if you are awarded, but there's just a lot of risk involved in general. So I wanted to make this video just to make sure that you were aware that the opportunity does exist, and to let you know that you might be eligible, again, whether you are a home-based provider or a center-based provider, you could possibly apply if you meet the eligibility requirements. And briefly, I do want to mention something about home daycare providers because I see that there is a lot of confusion. I'm a part of a couple different Facebook groups that contain providers and home daycares and center owners across New York State. And I do see that there are some people that think that this grant is one thing, or that contracting with the city is not possible, or that you have to go through a network. I'll briefly touch on networks. If you are a family daycare provider in the city of New York, again, one of the 5 boroughs, you do have an opportunity to get into a contract with what's called a network. And I believe that networks are responsible for helping you with your food program. They oversee the food program if you have it, with doing inspections to make sure you're following the child and adult care food program like regulations and you're serving appropriate meals. And then they also pay you out for the reimbursements. We don't really get that oversight as center providers, but if you're in a home daycare, I believe the networks help with that if you want to participate in the child and adult care food program. You could also get help from a network with getting a universal pre-K program in your home daycare. And I believe that the requirements are a bit different. I don't believe that you have to have a certified teacher running the program if you are in a home-based program and you go through a network for the contract. And the network might also have a different application process and a different timeline, because I did see someone saying that the applications are done, you can't apply anymore, and that's just not accurate. The city does still have the RFP out and proposals are not due until November 30th. However, if the process that that person was talking about was going through a network that she is aware of, it very well may be that the application process to go through that network to apply for UPK is done. But just know that if you do go through a network, you will have a lot of oversight with multiple inspections from that network coming in to inspect your program and enforce the DOE rules for running a UPK program. And that network is going to take a very significant chunk of the money. I did see that some people were saying it's regardless of your qualifications or how many kids you have or whatever. If you have UPK, you can only get $37 a day for the UPK kids in your program. Again, if you go through the network. That's a big difference from the $17,000 a year that I mentioned. So there are pros and cons, I believe, to going through a network versus trying to get the contract directly with the DOE. You might have an easier chance of going through the network to get the award. However, if you go through the DOE and contract with them directly, you will definitely earn way more money. So that's something to consider as well. And unfortunately, I don't have any references that I can provide for a network. I would say that if you have access to it, just go on Facebook and search for New York State daycare provider groups and join a group and maybe ask in there, because I'm sure you'll get a lot of responses from people that are already in networks that can maybe go through that process with you. But specifically, contracting with the DOE, you alone would be responsible for making sure that you follow all of their rules. You'll get visits, I believe, directly from the city instead of a network representative. And there's a lot of paperwork, just to be quite honest, a lot of paperwork, and you have to make sure you're following their curriculum and their expectations. A network kind of holds your hand through that process, and they have the certified professionals, I believe, that will oversee your program. But that's a lot of overhead. You'll have a licensor that you'll have to report to for inspections with compliance with licensing. You also have to make sure you're following the DOE rules, and you have to make sure you're upholding the network's expectations and getting inspected by them. So you'll have a lot of inspections and visitors in your program in that way. I do know that home daycare providers can also directly contract with New York City, so that is possible. It might be too late for you to apply with a network, but it is definitely not too late for you to submit your proposal directly with the city. Earlier this year, I did a podcast episode with someone named Tiffany Diaz, who originally came to me as a client of mine, and I loved her story so much that I invited her to be on my Childcare Sights and Sounds podcast, which gets released every Tuesday. Currently, we're in season 3, so look out tomorrow. If you're watching this on the day that this is published, tomorrow there'll be a new episode of Childcare Sights and Sounds. But anyway, earlier this year, I published an episode of Childcare Sights and Sounds featuring Tiffany Diaz. I believe during that podcast episode, she mentioned that she's a home daycare provider, and she also offers and has a contract with the DOE directly to provide universal pre-K inside of her program. So it's possible, and she's very successful with it. If you haven't already listened to that podcast episode, then I'll leave it linked in the description below for you to check out. But it is such an exciting opportunity that I personally am trying to take advantage of and start up a program in one of the eligible areas so that we can continue to expand and finally be a part of this initiative. I have been looking at RFPs for New York City since I had a home daycare program back in 2014, and I just never could quite find myself in the appropriate space to make sure I could go for it until now. So I'm really hoping, I got all my fingers crossed and my toes crossed, and I'm asking for prayers to make sure that this goes through. If it doesn't, then we will certainly continue trying in the next RFP that we might be eligible for. One of my centers is contracted with our local school district in Long Island. The process is different. Again, that video is linked down below in the description. However, the process for submitting proposals and the RFP process for outside of New York State is much different than New York City 5 boroughs. In New York City, it's much more robust, a lot more requirements, a lot more paperwork, a lot more oversight. At least that's my experience. But my first center-based location does have a universal pre-K contract, so it's not a completely foreign concept, but it was just much easier to access. If you are not in New York City, or if you are not thinking about opening a program in New York City, might still have an opportunity to get a universal pre-K contract with your local school district in your area of New York State, but your school district has to offer it. Again, not every school district offers universal pre-K. So you would want to maybe do a quick Google search on your school district, or go to your school district's homepage website, or just simply call them and ask if they have universal pre-K. If they don't, maybe it's something that they were offered and just didn't take advantage of because they didn't have anybody to run it and didn't want to take the responsibility on alone as a district. There are some school districts that only contract out to CBOs. So you might be letting them know that there's someone in the area that's interested in offering universal pre-K, and maybe they'll take advantage of those funds in the future. But if they already have it available to them, then you would want to make sure you give them your information and make it clear that you would like to be notified the next time an RFP is available. Again, I did do a whole video, I believe, about my UPK experience in Long Island. I'll leave it linked below. Check that out for some more context. However, if you are interested in getting a DOE contract in one of the New York City 5 boroughs, please look into the current RFP that is out. You have until November 30th to apply, and I'll leave whatever information I can also linked in the description of this video, not just my own videos, but also information about this New York City opportunity that is available for you. And I think that's enough. I could ramble on forever about the requirements and what I know about this opportunity, but it is really a lot and would be more useful to you if you just did your own research. So again, check the description box out. I will have my video tour posted of center number 3 in a couple of days. So turn your post notifications on and subscribe to this channel if you are not already subscribed, so that you can be notified whenever I do release a new video. As a reminder, I do currently have a sale going on for my latest course that was released in January until November 30th, until the end of this month. You can get 25% off on 5 steps to start a 5-star childcare business. If you're interested in that, I will leave it in the description below. So just check out the description, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.